Do we ever say that Jerry West was carried by Wilt Chamberlain when he won the only title of his career? Do we say that Magic Johnson got carried by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar when he won his first 3 titles? And do we ever say that Steph Curry got carried by Kevin Durant when they won back-to-back titles? We all know the answer to these questions. It never gets said because all of those players were considered to be equals. But for some odd reason, Kobe's biggest detractors make the ridiculous claim that he got carried by Shaq for the first 3 titles that he won. He gets put in the same boat as players such as Scottie Pippen, Kevin McHale, or Klay Thompson. Players where we can say that they got carried by a superior player. I don't know about you, but there's something wrong with that picture. I'm here to give you the facts of the matter and to prove with numbers that the notion that Kobe got carried is an absolute myth. Let's first talk about why it's so hard for a team's second scoring option to play as one of the top 5 players in the league. If you look throughout the history of the NBA, we rarely see a team that has 2 other players that are legitimate MVP candidates. It's hard to explain. It could be due to the fact that it's hard for players and coaches to manage which and when the players will get their touches. It can also be that the star players don't know when to take over the game for fear of stepping on anyone's toes. Or it could be that the whole tactic of, here, I just shot the ball, now it's your turn to shoot approach, is too predictable. The offense becomes stagnant and it's easier for the opposing team to defend. If you don't have the right coach and system in place, it can be easy for teams with a lot of talent to underachieve. The reality is that there are few players that can strive in that role. It's not for everybody. That's why there have only been 4 teams that have won the championship since 2000 that had 2 players that got selected to at least the All-NBA second team. Those teams were the 2001 Lakers, the 2002 Lakers, the 2017 Warriors, and the 2020 Lakers. Notice that Kobe and Shaq accomplished that twice out of the 4 examples. Then we have this next stat. There have only been 7 different pairs of teammates since 2000 that have averaged at least 25 points per game in the same season, and they were qualified to receive the scoring title due to the number of games they played that year. Here's a list of teammates that have accomplished this. Notice that when it works, your team is going to have an enormous amount of success. 4 of those seasons ended with a championship, and 2 of those seasons came from the Kobe Shaq Lakers. Then 3 of those seasons ended with the team reaching the finals. Only 1 of those seasons, the 2008 Denver Nuggets, got bounced from the first round. You may also notice that the duo of LeBron and Wade only accomplished that once, or that the other great duos of the NBA that include Durant and Westbrook, Curry and Thompson, Westbrook and Paul George, Kawhi and Paul George, Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine, or Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker never accomplished that. Now, did you notice that out of the 10 examples that we displayed, Shaq and Kobe were able to average that many points for 3 straight seasons? Let's try to put that in perspective. In the history of the NBA, only Elgin Baylor and Jerry West were able to surpass the number of times that Shaq and Kobe averaged at least 25 points per game for a season. So the numbers tell us that in the modern NBA, Kobe is the greatest player to ever be considered the co-star of a team. But now let's talk about the postseason numbers. Here are the number of times that Kobe averaged more points than Shaq in a playoff series between 2000 to 2004. That is 8 of the 18 playoff series that they participated in. So nearly half the time, you can count on Kobe to score more than Shaq did in the playoffs. And if you notice in their 2001 series against the Kings, they both averaged over 30 points per game. That is the only time since the 60s that a pair of teammates averaged over 30 points for a playoff series. Now let's go to the next graphic and see the number of times that a pair of teammates averaged over 25 points for the playoffs while winning the title. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the list throughout NBA history. Notice that they are the closest duo to ever average over 30 points per game while winning the title. The facts are just overwhelming at this point. So the real question is, why would anyone in their right mind claim that Kobe got carried? The reason is for how dominant Shaq was in the finals compared to how Kobe performed. That was especially the case when you see their averages for the 2000 finals. Shaq averaged nearly 40 points, and Kobe averaged 15 points on 36% shooting. That is a huge difference there. But for some reason, We just push aside the important detail that Kobe suffered an ankle sprain in Game 2 after scoring only 2 points in the first quarter when the injury occurred. He then missed Game 3, he played brilliantly in Game 4, and then he couldn't find the basket for the following 2 games. Why was that? Could it be that the injury was affecting his game dramatically? Or was the defensive tandem of Mark Jackson and Reggie Miller just too much for him to handle? Let's not forget that he was averaging 23 points per game on 46% shooting for the first 3 rounds of the playoffs. And according to Fox Sports, Kobe mentioned that it was the worst sprained ankle of his career. For the player that is known to play through tough injuries, we shouldn't take those words lightly. Then for the finals in 2001 and 2002, Shaq was clearly the better performer against the New Jersey Nets that had no chance of beating the Lakers, and the one-man show that the Philadelphia 76ers were. There's no argument there. But here's the question. Do we make such a big deal knowing that Kobe was clearly the better performer in the 2001 conference finals against the best team in the league, the San Antonio Spurs? What about the 2002 semifinals against the Spurs that had the same record as LA? Shaq averaged 21.4 points on 44% shooting, while Kobe averaged 26.2 points on 45% shooting. Why don't we make a bigger deal of Kobe being the best player on the team against the more superior Western Conference opponents? Understandably, Shaq performing like that on the biggest stage should hold a little more weight. But none of that means that the dynasty of the Los Angeles Lakers was carried by Shaquille O'Neal, unless you want to ignore all the numbers that say otherwise. It's just as Shaq has said numerous times, we will always go down in history as the most enigmatic, controversial, dominant 1-2 punch ever created. After what we've considered, he's telling the absolute truth. The numbers and the hardware back it up. They might not be the most accomplished duo, but they are the most dominant. And they both needed to be great in order for them to three-peat, which is something that we haven't seen in over 2 decades and counting.